Well, good morning and welcome to Elevenses. I trust you can hear me out there. If you can't hear me, just let me know, because for some reason the sound didn't come over on the video there this morning, the little video intro. So I'm sure somebody will tell me very, very quickly if they can't hear me. Nick has already said hello. Good morning, Nick. Right, so for the moment, I will trust that you can hear me. I'm not quite sure what the glitch there was. So I've got a fairly packed schedule of stories for you this morning, this Sunday morning, 24th of January, 2021. At the moment, it's snowing hard in London. It started about 30 minutes ago. And looking at the radar, we've probably got another 30 minutes to an hour of snow. And if you're not getting it in Kent yet, you will be getting the snow fairly soon. And plenty of people are saying they can hear me fine, which is good. Morning, Cheryl, Paul, and Tony. Good to see you all here. Right. Okay. So what have we got for you today then? Well, don't forget, let's start by just reminding you that if you've got a question or a comment about anything, I can get back to you at the end of the show. MAG are arguing that the refusal to extend CBT certificates is discriminatory. TfL's street space schemes are seriously flawed, says the High Court. The 2021 MCN London Motorcycle Show is not surprisingly cancelled. Electric vehicle batteries capable of taking a charge in just 5 minutes have been shown on a production line. And if you can't ride, you can always strap your bike to a simulator. So settle yourself down for the next 20-25 minutes or so while I take you through those stories. Don't forget, if you can't catch it live, you can always pop over to my YouTube channel at Survival Skills UK and Poppo, and you'll get the old ones over there. Right, okay, so I've mentioned a number of times already that lockdown poses a specific problem for the motorcycle community, and that's the 2-year life and the consequent expiry of the compulsory basic training certificate. Now, unlike the first lockdown, when basic training schools were actually allowed to continue training for key workers, assuming suitable precautions, of course, were in place, which meant they could issue new and replacement CBT certificates. In November, the industry was specifically instructed by the DVSA and the DFT to cease operations. Although when challenged, their must not decree was rapidly withdrawn and a should not was substituted, the DVSA did wave the big stick and basically threatened any trainers who were stopped and fined by police that they would subsequently be considered not to be fit and proper people to conduct training, and they would therefore have their authorization as approved instructors or, in fact, ATBs, approved training bodies, removed, and that would basically shut people down. So, not surprisingly, even though the letter of the law wasn't entirely clear, nearly every school actually complied, because they knew basically that the November lockdown was only going to be for 4 weeks and that they could resume operations on the far side. Well, we all know what happened then. Tier 4 for most of the country, and then lockdown 3. So how are riders being affected? Well, the short answer is we don't really know. Now, since the beginning of November, I've received a number of messages and emails from bikers who basically are either coming to the end of their CBT life, or they have already run out of CBT, or in a few cases, people have been wanting to do CBT to get to work, and again, to avoid public transport during the spike in the case numbers for the pandemic. Now, official data tells us that under normal circumstances, something around 6,000 CBT certificates are issued every month. So the current shutdown's currently running towards 3 months long, basically, if you think about it. November, December, and now most of January has disappeared. So what that means is there are something like 18,000 CBT certificates that have expired over the course of these 3 months, and that those riders are unable to replace those CBT certificates. These ones that would have been issued back in the winter of 2018 and early 2019. And of course, no one back then had a clue about what was coming. So who is actually riding on a CBT? Well, some of those CBT certificates issued 2 years ago would have been to riders who were looking to pass their bike test and who did therefore go on to gain a full license. So we don't need to worry about those. A few would also belong to riders who tried out two wheels and gave up. So again, we don't have to worry about them. They're not a concern either. A few will also belong to riders who intended to pass the test but somehow didn't get round to it before the pandemic arrived. And yes, okay, it's inconvenient for them. They'll have to go back to square one and take the CBT and probably the theory test too, but that's another problem. But where the real problem lies is current riders who rely on a CBT to be road legal. There are three groups really. The first group is the under 21s, and the current licensing system as it operates at the moment means that if you're under 21 you can ride a 125 on an L plate. Fair enough. The problem is that for those riders, once they've actually passed the test, they can still only ride a 125. So for those younger riders, there is no drive, no push to get past the bike test and onto a full license machine, because that full license machine will still only be a 125. So they basically stick to riding on CBT, do a renewal, and then when they get to 21 plus, that's when they'll start thinking about taking a A2 test and getting onto a bigger bike. Now, the second group are older riders who have no need for anything bigger than a 125 because all they're doing is fairly short distance commuting. They'll often be riding a scooter, for example, back and forth to work. And ironically, because of the cost of staff parking, many hospital staff are actually using mopeds and scooters to get to work during the pandemic. Now, both of these groups are being inconvenienced, and obviously sometimes they're key workers. And there's a third group too. The professional food delivery riders. Now, personally, I have argued for many times and for many years that this job should not be available to somebody riding on an L plate and a CBT only, but the rules are the rules. They are allowed to do so, and right now, these riders are also being unable to renew their CBT, and of course, they are therefore unable to work. So these are the three groups who are really coming up against this expiring CBT problem. Now, the solution that has been proposed by myself very early on back in March, and also by rider groups, is that the CBT certificates simply be extended in the same way that driving licenses were extended and that MOTs were extended. Unfortunately, that suggestion, as I say, made right back at the beginning of lockdown, was promptly turned down by the DFT. Well, okay, we came out of the first lockdown, so there was obviously a rush from people to go and get their CBTs renewed, but of course not everybody needed one back then, and perhaps not everybody anticipated the third lockdown after the sort of November shutdown. So now MAG are on the case. It's taken them a while in this occasion, but they are aware of the problem. And what they've done is they've written to the Parliamentary Under Secretary of State, who's Rachel McLean MP, and they are arguing that this continued refusal to extend CBTs during lockdown is actually discriminatory. The argument is that the use of motorcycles during lockdown is a legitimate activity, and that motorcyclists with expired CBTs are the only road group facing a restriction on travel. In their letter to Rachel McLean, MAG states, for many, including delivery riders and those who access schemes such as Wheels to Work, this is their only viable transport choice for making essential trips, working as a key worker in health or social care, or as a delivery rider or delivering items ordered online by those obeying the government guidance to avoid non-essential travel. Now, what MAG are saying is they're not asking for permanent change to the 2-year real regulation. What they basically want is a temporary intervention of the same style that was made for MOTs. And MAG's Director of Campaigns and Political Engagement, Colin Brown, points out that riding on L plates is a legitimate choice. He said, "We've no data on the number of riders being impacted, but we are receiving many calls from members asking that something be done. It would be easy to say that the problem affects very few riders, but it's not fair to discriminate against those few. We did not accept that this would be hard to administer. If there is a will to avoid this unnecessary discrimination, the government must find a way to do it." The government's objection was that it would set up a legal precedent. I think that was their objection. But the thing is that the CBT is a legal document. You have to be an approved instructor to issue one. You can't just get one willy-nilly from anyone who sort of wants to sign a piece of paper. It's a legal document, and if it's a legal document, I don't see that there is actually any objection to extending the validity of that legal document in the same way as was done for driving licenses. So, right, okay, long story there, but I think it's an important one to cover. And I really, really think that this is something that needs to be pushed and pressed. We could be in lockdown. It looks like it's likely to go on at least till Easter, and I suspect it could go on even after that. Right, so time for a quick swig. Okay, so what's next then? Well, the Mayor and Transport for London have acted illegally in closing down parts of London. There is the picture that's it. I've got the picture up. Yes, that's right. It's the street space scheme. It banned taxis from roads across central London, including Bishopsgate. Now, this is a fairly complicated story, so listen carefully. Basically, the street space scheme, was to make parts of the capital car-free zones, and it would have been one of the largest car-free zones in any city in the world. And it's basically introduced expanded capacity for pedestrians and cyclists on certain roads, plus bus-only corridors, which banned turns into certain roads and stopped access to taxi drivers across central London in May. And it's this access to taxis which is the important bit, because taxi unions and their associations raised concerns over the scheme because they pointed out that they would lose trade in those restricted access areas. They couldn't get in and they couldn't deliver people there either. And the case went to the High Court, and in the judgment, Justice Lang told the court that the Mayor and the TfL had failed to distinguish taxis from general traffic and failed to recognise them as a mode of public transport, and that it was both unfair and irrational to introduce such extreme measures if it was not necessary to do so when they impacted adversely on certain sections of the public. Now, crucially, what she also ruled on was the wider street space initiative that was put in place in May. And if you look at the photo on the screen there, you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. As well as the implementation of bus gates and banned turns and access to certain streets in London, which banned taxis, many roads were also modified with the aim of encouraging walking and cycling. And the scheme included the introduction of several hundred miles of temporary cycle lanes across London, including the highly controversial and widely condemned narrowing of Park Lane and the Euston Road, which is what you're looking at here. In her judgment, Justice Lang concluded that the street space scheme was actually an ill-considered response which sought to take advantage of the pandemic to push through, on an emergency basis without consultation, radical changes to London streets. She added, the scale and ambition of the proposal and the manner in which they were described strongly suggests that the Mayor and TfL intended these schemes would become permanent once the temporary orders expired. However, there is no evidence to suggest that there will be a permanent pandemic requiring continuation of the extreme measures introduced by the government in 2020. She said that the street space scheme would now have to be reconsidered and seriously amended. Predictably, TfL aren't very happy with the ruling. They said they're disappointed, and they said they would appeal it. And that all schemes would basically stay in place pending the result of that appeal. Now, for those of you who don't live in London, what does that mean? Well, a lawyer involved in the case basically said that that judgment also paves the way for similar schemes put in place by councils in other parts of the country to be challenged. Whilst the BBC are suggesting that this will be a disappointment to those who support making cycling and walking easier and safer, there are actually a surprising number of cycle campaigners who've not been happy with these road closures and the way they were implemented, since what they've done is that they've actually increased traffic pressure on other main roads, with the resulting congestion on those roads actually making cycling more difficult and obviously increasing pollution if you happen to be walking or cycling down those roads. And in fact, one high-profile scheme on Kensington High Street was actually removed late last year following complaints by locals, including cyclists, by the way, not just motorists. Right, so what else? Well, okay, one of the things that has gone by the board with coronavirus is, sad to say, the London Motorcycle Show. As you can see, that was due to happen just a couple of weeks into the future at Excel. It was probably always a bit of a shot in the dark, and it's gone the way of many other activities last year, and I suspect this year too. The organisers say, with great sadness, we have to confirm the cancellation of the 2021 MCN London Motorcycle Show. After relentlessly exploring every avenue of opportunity to run the show, we must all follow the government guidelines, and the latest lockdown measures mean we are unable to run the event this year. However, we are absolutely committed to bringing the MCN London Motorcycle Show back to life in 2022. Plans are already underway to deliver our best show ever, etc., etc. If you do have a ticket for the 2021 event, it'll either automatically roll over to 2022, or you can apply for a refund. The choice is yours. Now, that was hardly a shocker moment number one. Here's hardly a shocker moment number two. Aviva have released some research, and I use the term research advisedly, to suggest that there could be an increase in the number of potentially dangerous vehicles on our roads. For example, they claim, whilst almost half of all drivers have been cleaning their cars during the pandemic, more than 2/3 haven't checked their tyre tread. I wonder why not. Might it have something to do with the fact that whilst our vehicles are parked up, they still get dirty? But do our tyres wear out while we're parked? My camper did precisely 900 miles between MOTs, and that included stretching the MOT renewal date. So how much wear has that actually caused to my tyres? Yeah, okay. I mean, it's a good idea if you've got a parked up vehicle to give it a good check over before using it again. I'd certainly check tyre pressures. Brake calipers on bikes are another thing that's notorious for seizing up, and that would certainly be something I would check. Chains will probably have gone rusty, and it's useful to know that tyres that have been standing for long periods in the sun can also wear more quickly due to UV degradation. You may get reduced grip, so it may be needed to think about changing your tyres fairly pronto. But basically, the answer is to use your common sense, not be panicked by articles like that one. Okay, so don't forget, if you are looking for something to read, you can head over to my Ko-fi page, where I have been putting up my Facebook archive. At the moment, 2014 to 2016 are all up. That's 3 years of articles. That's 300 articles, 2 a week, which you can head over there and access for just the price of a cup of coffee. If you're wanting a little bit more to read, then you can head over to my Spotlight page on Lulu, and you can find my Better Biking books too. Okay, so next item, electric vehicles. Ever since the first electric vehicles actually rolled off the production line, there have been promises of battery technology that will be capable of taking a rapid full charge. And the goal, obviously, is to get something, electric vehicle, which you can charge up as quickly as you could fill a petrol or a diesel vehicle. Right now, the first quick charge batteries have actually been produced using a factory production process. These new style lithium ion batteries were developed by an Israeli company called StoreDot. Now, StoreDot have already demonstrated that this fast charge works in phones, drones, and scooters. And what they have done is they have produced a run of 1,000 batteries manufactured by the Eve Energy company in China. Excuse me. And these batteries have actually been produced on standard production lines. Now, StoreDot do appear to be a fairly small startup at the moment, but they do have backing from Daimler, BP, Samsung, and TDK. Now, the good news is that these batteries can be fully charged in 5 minutes. But as you probably guessed, stuffing that much electricity into a battery does require higher powered chargers than are currently available. But here is the good news. By using currently available charging infrastructure, the company StoreDot believes that they can get 100 miles worth of range into a car battery in just 5 minutes. So it's not a full charge, but it is a distinct improvement on the chargers that you're getting at the moment, where you have to sit and wait anything up to a couple of hours to get the range out of your car. Now, Doran Meyersdorf, who's the CEO of StoreDot, says the number one barrier to the adoption of electric vehicles is no longer cost, and that's something I'll be looking at actually in the next show. It's range anxiety. You're either afraid you're going to get stuck on the highway, or you're going to need to sit in a charging station for 2 hours. But if the experience of the driver is exactly like fueling a petrol car, the whole anxiety goes away. A 5-minute charging lithium-ion battery was considered to be impossible, but we are not releasing a lab prototype. We are releasing engineering samples from a mass production line. This demonstrates it's feasible and commercially ready. Okay, now basically a little bit of technology. Existing lithium-ion batteries use graphite as one electrode, and basically lithium ions are pushed into that to store the charge. But when you do that rapidly, you can overheat the graphite and basically short circuit the battery. The StoreDot battery replaces the graphite with a semiconductor made up of nanoparticles, and the ions can pass into that more quickly and easily with less heat. These nanoparticles are apparently based on germanium, which is water soluble and easier to handle. But they eventually plan to switch to using silicone, which is much cheaper. And I expect these prototypes to be available later this year. And they believe that these batteries will cost exactly the same as existing lithium-ion batteries, which, as I said, the price has fallen dramatically on those. So the bottleneck, as Meyersdorf says, is not the battery, it's the charging system. BP has 18,200 forecourts, and they understand that 10 years from now, these stations will be obsolete if they don't repurpose them for charging. They claim that the StoreDot battery will be good for 80% of the original capacity over 1,000 charging cycles. And they're not the only company that's working on fast charge technology. Tesla, Innovate, Silicon Nanotechnologies, all working on the silicon electrode technology. And a company called Etion is working with niobium oxide nanoparticles. One other interesting idea here is that the faster charging actually offers a second option. Rather than try to stuff a huge battery into a car to give the electric car a long range, what you do is you actually shrink the battery. You may be able to put 500 miles worth of fuel in your car, but how often do you actually run that from end to end? It's very rare that you will actually ever do that. So most of us will drive fairly short distances numerous times before we refill. Well, the idea here, of course, is that you can actually shrink the battery size with a quick charge, and then, okay, you do have to fill up more often. You may have to fill up a couple of times on a 200-mile drive, but again, for most purposes, what it means is that car will be filled up in short order, so you can shrink the battery. Now, that would reduce the cost of the car quite dramatically, or motorcycle, presumably. Okay, so is this ready for the road yet? Well, Anna Tomaszewska, who's at Imperial College London, she reviewed this fast charging battery technology in 2019. She's still cautious about the speed of the rollout. She believes that these technologies are probably market ready in 5 years or so, but she also believes they'll be more difficult and expensive to manufacture. So her thinking is that they'll appear in niche driven markets first, so high performance vehicles rather than price sensitive ones. Okay, good, cool. So what else have I got for you? Well, take a look at this. If you are like me, you've probably got a couple of bikes sitting around doing nothing at the moment. If you're a cyclist, you've probably seen the adverts for Zwift and Peloton, the bike training aids, where basically you strap your road bike onto a sort of turbo trainer gadget, and then what you do is you go ride on the screen, either by yourself with a bunch of other riders. So if you can harness that technology to something that's powered by a person, there's no good reason, of course, that you can't do the same with a motorcycle. And that's exactly what's happened here. It's a collaboration between a company called Moto Trainer and Dorna Sports, which run MotoGP. Now, the basic idea there, you can see the rig, you roll the bike up onto the rig, lock it in place, and then you have your screen in front of you, which allows you to ride around a circuit or a road. So it's basically it's a training software along the same lines as something, as I say, like Zwift or Peloton. And what you need to add to the package is the TV or projector and a PC. And once on board, the Moto Trainer will allow you to access videos of tracks all over the world. You're apparently allowed to upload your own videos as well, so you could video your own favorite circuit. The software on the higher end packages allows you to analyze your performance. It monitors the throttle, front and rear brakes, gearbox, and trajectories. Now, the thing will lean too, but the bad news is that the engine that allows the bike to lean, as presumably some kind of hydraulic pump, is an extra on the original price, and it does bump the price up pretty much. The Moto Trainer game can also be linked up to MotoGP, the sort of PlayStation game as well. So you can also access sort of esports, the world of esports. There's a third option, which is probably the most interesting one from my angle, and that's to use the machine as a riding school, road as it's called. It says you can learn to ride the motorcycle and to respect the road signs. You can choose your favorite route. Thanks to Moto Trainer, it's now possible to teach your students correct riding position with greater effectiveness, both for the student and the instructor. Less time, more results. The entire rig, minus bike, of course, weighs around 250 kilos. It comes with wheels, so you can move it around. It takes about an hour to install. The basic package starts at €4,900. The full MotoGP edition, which comes with the lean and the front fork engine, which makes the bike pitch forwards and backwards, is 14,900, so a little bit more expensive. And here's the bad news: you'll also need to remember to add VAT and shipping to that. So basically, it's not going to be a cheap option. If you're running a riding school, I think it's probably going to be out of the cost packet for most people. But if you want to have a look at what it's likely to be able to achieve, here is a link to a very short YouTube video. Let's pop that up. Click, paste. No, I'm in the wrong bit. Hang on, what am I doing here? Comments. Those comments. Yeah, okay. Oops. Okay, so there's a link to a short video. You can source, follow the links in that to the full web page with the gadget on it. So yes, there we go. Toy for people who have almost everything except the ability to ride their motorcycles at the moment. All right, I'm coming to the end of today's show. So just before I leave you, just a reminder that I am locked down but not shut down completely. I am still offering online coaching, and also for the price of that coffee, you can also access something over 300 better biking articles on my coffee page from my Facebook archive. You can also now send me direct messages on coffee over there as well. Not everybody who reads the Facebook posts does get to be a Facebook member, and if that happens, you can't access my private message system. But if you are a subscriber or a supporter over on coffee, and if you've ever been a subscriber or a supporter, you will get a send a message button over there if you logged in, and you can contact me directly, and I will get back to you with an answer. Okay, so that's just £3 to get your access for a month over there and start reading all those better biking articles. And just finally, I'll close out with another quick mention to my new newsletter, which is going out on Friday. Yesterday's, 2 days ago, the edition went out. And if you want to sign up for that and therefore bypass the problems of trying to access all my writing on Facebook, as you probably know, Facebook sets up algorithms which determine exactly what you see, and I know for a fact that many people do miss some of my posts. If you sign up for the newsletter there, that's the URL for it, then what you'll get is a digest of what's gone on Facebook over the previous few days, and you'll be able to follow the links in the newsletter straight back to the original article. And last but not least, don't forget, if you want to catch up with old shows, you can do it here on Facebook. You can find them over on YouTube, or you can access them on Coffee, LinkedIn, Twitter, and even via my what's the other one? I can't remember now. The other social network, Instagram. That's it for today. Stay safe out there. If you're not in the snow, be careful. I'll be back with another Elevenses on Wednesday. I trust you've enjoyed today's show, and I will see you again soon. Stay safe, everyone. Bye for now.